It's a perfect night to review horror because it's storming outside, so if you guys hear thunder in the background of this video, now you know why. In today's video, I'm going to be comparing Stephen King's It, the book, to its 90s TV miniseries adaptation, all in honor of the new upcoming remake. What are your thoughts on the remake? Let me know in the comments. Now, the original 90s TV miniseries is something that gave me nightmares throughout my entire childhood, so it's kind of ironic now that I'm reading the book that started it all before I go to sleep at night. These are the top 10 differences I noticed in the first part of It, parts 1 to 3, and then part 2 of this miniseries of mine, haha, will cover the differences in parts 4 and 5. Now, I think the film is undeniably legendary, and Tim Curry's portrayal of Pennywise the Clown is so spot on, and it's one of the highlights of the film, in my opinion. So, this book is fantastic because I always seem to imagine him in that role since I saw the movie first, which is why I think it's intriguing that I found all these very interesting and cool differences. I thought what better time than to read this book now, so that way I'd have the review ready by the time the remake came out. But I'm warning you, before we jump into the top 10 differences between this book and pseudo-90s movie adaptation, this is your spoiler warning. So turn back now if you don't want to be spoiled of anything. But if you're already familiar with the movie and or book, then please proceed. Or if you think the book is too long for you to finish, then this video is for you. Alrighty, the first difference I notice is the After the Festival section, which takes place in 1984. It's a story of how a man is murdered as part of a homophobic hate crime, his body dumped over the side of a bridge, and how Pennywise reappears, ushering a flood of balloons into the sky. It was a very chilling and bizarre opening that came right after the introduction where Georgie's paper boat goes down the storm drain. After that, I was definitely hooked and ready to finish this novel. The next difference I noticed is the confrontation between Henry and Ben by the Barons is much more violent than it was in the film version. This is probably because they could only get so much on TV at the time, but in the book he actually gets as far as to cutting the first letter of his initials into Ben's stomach before Ben can escape down into the Barrens. These guys really weren't playing around in the book, and Pennywise wasn't either. Obviously, another difference between the book and the film is that the book has more characterization and sets things up a little bit more believably. But that's not to say that the movie is completely unbelievable. It was definitely a film that gave me nightmares when I was a kid. One of the third major differences I noticed in the book is that we get to see Mike as a kid encounter a giant bird creature, which I couldn't help but imagine like a giant ostrich. This bird creature is actually been seen throughout the town's history, so it connects at a later point in the story as well. The next difference I noticed was Eddie has a story in the book where, when he was riding his bike past the house on Neibolt Street, a leper leaps out at him screaming, "Let me give you a blowjob, Eddie, come on!" And he even has like a little rhyme thing that goes with it. I was so stunned when I reached this point that I didn't know what the heck to even think. His friends, as he's telling them this story, think it's a homeless bum that has syphilis. So that difference was the one that made me decide I had to make this top 10 differences video. Alright, now if you've seen the movie, you're familiar with the scene where Bill finds Georgie's photo album and Georgie's photo winks at him, and when he drops the album, it starts bleeding all over the floor. Well, in the book that happens, but there's a follow-up scene to that where Richie follows Bill home, and they look at the album, and the picture is gone, but they can both see the dried blood on the floor. And when they flip through the album, they find a different picture, and in that picture, it comes to life. Bill touches the picture, and it cuts his hands up. So, Richie, thinking quickly, pulls Bill's hand away from the picture and saves it. This was an interesting difference, but I did think it added a lot to the overall story. The next big difference was that Bill wanted to investigate the house on Neibolt Street to see if Eddie's story was true. Because if Eddie's story was true, Bill suspected what Eddie saw was just a manifestation of it. And Bill knew that it had killed his brother Georgie, so then he wanted to kill it. Bill decides, instead of just taking a slingshot like in the film, he's going to take his father's gun. Smart decision. So Richie decides to go with Bill to investigate the house on Neibolt Street. Bill gives Richie the slingshot. They crawl under the dilapidated porch and through the little window into the basement, and they're not in the basement long before Richie sees the Wolfman that they all saw at the movies earlier in the book. The Wolfman is wearing a jacket from their high school, and beneath that he's wearing a clown suit. He chases them through the basement, and they attempt to escape by climbing up a pile of coal and out another of the small windows. Richie goes first, and Bill stays behind, firing off rounds at the wolf monster. Bill actually hits the wolf monster and gets a headshot, and he keeps coming anyway. So they run from the house on Neibolt Street and narrowly escape on Bill's bike, Silver, with the Wolfman chasing them in broad daylight the entire way out. This was one of the biggest differences between the book and the 90s film adaptation, and I thought it was a super cool scene. I could see why they excluded this scene from the 90s film adaptation, but I really enjoyed it in the book, and I think it added a lot to the story. The next big difference I noticed was that Mike's father, while on his deathbed, tells him an old story about the town's history. It's about how the town's wannabe KKK, the Legion of Decency, burned down a club called the Blackspot, killing a bunch of people. It was like a massacre. Hundreds of people died. It's on his deathbed that Mike's father tells him that he saw the same giant bird monster that Mike saw earlier, which, again, I can only imagine like a giant ostrich. But Mike's father describes the bird as not flying, but just staying in air. Mike asks if the bird was hovering, and his father replies, no, it was floating. The next difference that I noticed was that after the losers' reunion, they all decided, of course, to split up to see if that would help jog their memory of revisiting old locations in the town. In the book, it shows Eddie revisiting a baseball field. That's overgrown now, but it's where they used to play as kids. There, he's confronted once again by the Leper that reveals himself to be Pennywise, and that they have no hope of stopping him. The ninth big difference that I discovered between the book and the film, instead of Mike having Bill's old bike, Silver, in his garage, Bill has to buy his bike from a pawn shop that he visits after having visited the gutter where Georgie was killed. I can see why in the film they would just have Mike have the bike, seeing as how it would save screen time. But I thought it was interesting that the book had this difference, and that Bill was the one to find it. The last big difference I noticed between the book and the movie is that where in the movie Beverly's husband doesn't try to pursue her at all after she leaves, whereas in the book there's an entire chapter where Beverly's husband Tom visits one of her friends and interrogates her friend until she reveals that Beverly was going to Derry, and then Tom leaves to pursue Beverly, and her friend calls to try to warn her. Again, I can see why they decided to leave this bit out of the movie to save screen time, but I do really enjoy it, and I think it's an interesting development in the book and a great way to build suspense. This book is really long, so I'm glad it does do so much to try to build up horror, dread, and suspense. I think overall it does a very good job and never sits too long at any one thing before moving on. That being said, I can't wait to get to the next part of this differences video and finish the book and get on to my review. I really hope that the remake is good. What do you guys think? I'm excited to see how they handle it in a two-part feature film aspect, whereas it was a TV miniseries before. They can get away with a lot more in a film, like a true film adaptation. I'll be excited to see what they do. What are your thoughts on the remake? Let me know in the comments. Well, I'll catch you guys next time.